Here is the news. The Germans are shocked by their minister. German diplomacy is deteriorating. Because of democracy. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock chose an extremely unfortunate wording to comment on the Taiwan scandal, which greatly complicated relations between Berlin and Beijing. German foreign policy under Baerbock has completely lost its rationality and works to the detriment of the country. But this is not only Baerbock's fault, it is a problem of the system as a whole. Democracy ruined Germany's foreign policy. Not in the sense, of course, that what the Germans had before democracy is better than what they have now. But what they have now is also capable of leading to great trouble, both the Germans and the entire planet. The problem, as is often the case, is in the extremes. Maximum inclusiveness, that is, the representation of different groups and opinions, coupled with safeties against the concentration of power in one hand, is what the Germans were striving for after the war, or rather, what they were forced to strive for. But until it reached the maximum, and the political system of Germany was based on two parties, the conservative CDU-CSU and the left-wing SPD, by the way, the oldest active in the country, it worked much better. There were much fewer random people in it who simply had no place in responsible positions. Two-party systems are often criticized precisely for lack of democracy. What kind of choice is it, if it is a choice of only two chairs? But in such cases, it is easier to form a responsible government. There are always two cabinets of ministers, the manager and the shadow, ready to be replaced at any time without loss of quality in work. This is how Britain functioned for centuries, just like Germany was turning into the main economy of Europe, rising from the ruins. A radical who got into such a system was either expelled in the course of the inter-party struggle, or turned around, he moved closer to the center, since the majority almost always votes for the golden mean. Olaf Scholz in his youth, being in the ranks of the same SPD as now, fought against world capitalism in general and against the aggressive NATO bloc in particular. But then he was a nobody, and now he is a chancellor with plus or minus moderate views on economics and politics. But the system in Germany no longer works the way it used to, when the party that won the election could form a cabinet of ministers only from its own and trusted people. Everything is now much more complicated. Having become disillusioned with the two traditional players, the Germans began to vote for a variety of exotics, forces that had never previously claimed anything, as a maximum, for the status of an insignificant partner with responsible winners. Under the CDU-CSU, this role was often played by liberals from the FDP. When this happened at the regional level, it was not a problem. Even then, there was no time when the radicals fell into the ruling coalition in the capital, the ultra-liberal, rather messy and proud of it all. Berlin is less like Germany than any other of its cities. But at the federal level, the only one where foreign policy is in the sphere of responsibility, this has become a problem. Due to the growing popularity of small parties, the votes were diluted. Neither the CDU-CSU nor the SPD could no longer lead the country alone. In the best case for the country, he created the so-called Grand Coalition, an unnatural alliance of eternal rivals, who, nevertheless, were united by responsibility and moderation in their approach. In the worst case, and the current one too, it was necessary to enter into an alliance with some small party, which only yesterday was not influential and almost extremist. In the specific German case, this is the Greens, whose core electorate is radical youth, diverse minorities, feminists, etc. Two other major non-systemic forces, the alternative for Germany and the left, have so far been declared unshakable and untouchable, now especially, as it is believed, their pro-Russian sentiments. But the path to power was open to the ideological fans of NATO, the Greens. Without them the power simply did not develop mathematically, although this party has gone quite far in its radicalism, albeit in a different direction than the left and AfD. If, when dividing their portfolios, they were given unimportant ministries for the same ecology, for example, where they would fight to reduce meat production and protect the rights of chickens, and sometimes even do something useful for the environment, the problem of irresponsible exotics in power could be leveled. But according to the tradition established in Germany, not only the post of vice-chancellor, but also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is unsubscribed to the partner. In many other completely democratic countries, where the government enters into a forced coalition with more radical parties, they do not even dare to think about gaining control over foreign policy. And the Germans do not feel sorry for their own. In 1999, the leader of the Greens and Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer dragged the quite peaceful Gerhard Schroeder into the Kosovo adventure and aggression against Yugoslavia. In 2022, the leader of the Greens and Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock did everything to make relations with Russia worse than possible, and the economic damage to Germany more than reasonable. But even this seemed to be not enough. Burbach decided to comment on the conflict between the US and China around Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in the most provocative way for Beijing. Firstly, she stated that she would definitely support Taipei in the event of a military operation by the PRC. That is, it announced in advance its readiness to participate in at least a proxy war with another nuclear power, in addition to Russia. Secondly, she called China and Taiwan neighbors, as if we are talking about two different states, although this is not officially the case for Germany. This is the case when the head of German diplomacy missed a great opportunity to remain silent. The activist in it still prevails over the politician. From the head of pan-European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, a comment on the same topic was almost pulled out with tics. A day later, he spoke in the spirit that nothing important had happened, there was no need to escalate. Even the head of British diplomacy and the main contender for the post of Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was a hawk, answering the question of supporting Taiwan as evasively as possible, but at the same time firmly assured that she was not going to fly there. Doesn't want to aimlessly provoke Beijing. At the same time, their German colleague Burbach is voluntarily getting into a foreign, American-Chinese conflict, complicating relations with Beijing, which in Berlin are generally good. Their rapprochement was a statement of the codependence of economies and was partly directed against the United States under President Donald Trump. Trump loved protectionism, Angela Merkel and Xi Jinping did not. These good relations are especially important for Germany now if it does not want to participate in an economic war on two fronts against Russia and against the PRC, with which only yesterday the benefits of the new Silk Road project were being calculated. But for some reason, Burbach wants a war on two fronts and she is lucky that China, which is gradually becoming a taste, does not want this yet. Beijing warned Germany that the foreign minister's statement would have consequences, but did not aggravate it and hoped that the Germans would develop a correct position on Taiwan. Such a position, implying non-intervention in an obviously foreign conflict, certainly exists in Germany. But there is no political scheme in which such a position would dominate in the foreign ministry, where unqualified and random people now run the show. For Russia, the situation with this particular conflict is developing successfully. We are interested in China going into confrontation not only with the US and Japan, but also with the West as a whole, since we ourselves are in such a position. But in our case, everything could be different, less painful, if qualified people were in charge of diplomacy in the main economy of Europe. There is practically no hope of returning to such times. When Greta Thunberg is fully grown, and power passes to the activists of her generation, the era of Annalena Baerbock will seem like a time of rationality, restraint and protection of national interests. Even now, the Green Ministerian drags coals from a nuclear fire without any purpose.